So, looking at the state of IndyCar as a whole right now, before we get into the predictions, just kind of looking at where we stand as a sport going into the month of May. And honestly, yeah, the Penske situation this season wasn't great. Yeah, the thermal challenge was a dud in my opinion. The All-Star race, it needs to be an oval night race either before the month of May or after, preferably after the month of May. Whether that be maybe after. We had the crazy realization last week. Like it had just completely slipped my mind that like we don't have Texas on the schedule this year. Like we've done a preview of the series, we did all that stuff, and then I only just realized oh yeah, we don't have Texas. Like heck, I'd have that as the All-Star race. That would be a fun one. Because that one always
you gotta have it after the Indy 500 to build off of the momentum.
Right. But the fact that I think one thing that kind of makes me be like, hey, this is in a good place right now. I think we're okay. I mean, you've got one of the biggest stars in racing right now, and Kyle Larson, a driver who races for the most prestigious team in NASCAR. He's interested, he's interested in doing the double. And that speaks volume for IndyCar. Now, granted, he's not doing this to help IndyCar. He's doing this to as a cool notch in my belt kind of thing. But like I said before the season, this is the biggest double attempt since Tony Stewart in terms of NASCAR title contender running the 500 and the Coke 600. Obviously, we've seen Robbie Gordon do it since Tony Stewart. We've seen Kurt Busch do it since then, but Kurt Busch was the most recent driver to do it, and he, I think for one, didn't even finish the double, which I mean, it's tough to do. I'm not knocking him for that, but he ended up finishing 12th in NASCAR points. So as far as having a driver that, hey, just literally won the closest race in NASCAR history last week, and in a couple weeks he'll be driving an IndyCar. I mean, I think that's great for the sport, and puts it in a great spot. Yeah, there's other things that man, I wish it would change, but the fact of the matter is, I don't think it is going to change. But as the sport as a whole, I think they're in a good place right now.
So, okay, what spawned this question was, at the beginning of the month of May, I stated that I'm just not as excited about the month of May as I usually am. And a lot of it has to do, well, actually all of it has to do with just the kind of the amount of negative headlines coming out of IndyCar week after week after week after week. Whether it's the Penske cheating scandal or anonymous owners and a random David Malukas being let go. That one I'm not so on fire about. It was a negative headline, but at the same time, it's kind of dude, you got injured in a non-racing incident. You got to be more careful.
Yeah,
you don't have the clout to your name yet to be able to hang on through that kind of injury. Chase Elliott did it. Well, Chase Elliott's also been named the most popular driver in NASCAR year after year after year. So, yeah, so he's able to hold on to that. But at the same time, the NASCAR season is also
36
much longer than the
February to November.
Yeah, it's basically year round. But and then just the I don't know, the animosity almost that other owners have towards Penske this year, and how everybody's just turned on him. And then there's the whole, everybody just doesn't like Zach Brown from McLaren. And it's just I don't know. There's just a lot of just negativity. And then also with how the All-Star whatever challenge was just an absolute dud. An absolute just dud. And it was just how can you get it? Was just I haven't been able to get as excited for it. Now it's changing. That's changing as we get more into the month of May. We decorate the front of the house for it with checkered flags and hang up the IMS flag and everything. And my kids are seeing all this stuff around town and wanting to be more involved with it. You just have to tell them every time they see a race car on TV, it's not Chase Elliott. They love Chase Elliott mostly because his name's Chase, and that's also somebody from Paw Patrol. But but it's just so it's starting to come around. But I just feel like right now, there IndyCar as a whole is just kind of it just seems stuck in the mud, and I think that's what a lot of the other owners are just kind of feeling upset about. Like, look, we for a while there we were really battling with NASCAR and potentially overtaking them. Then NASCAR just kind of flipped the switch, kind of figured some things out, and now they're back to being popular. And then I go back to this one. It's not a knock on the drivers whatsoever, like the older drivers. They're still good, but it is the same names year after year after year. Well, you can say the same thing about NASCAR. Well, yeah, but at the same time, the older drivers are now starting to fade to the back, and there's these new younger drivers that are everybody's very excited about, and it just seems like the top tier teams are. I mean, Ganassi, props to you for Linus Lundqvist, because out of all the top teams, that is the youngest driver, and or the freshest name at least. So props to them on that, but otherwise it's just we're with the same old. But at the same, I mean, because they're good, nobody else's can really afford them, and I don't know. I mean, then you got a guy like Will Power who's just kind of there with Penske, and it's like, couldn't somebody? Isn't there a younger driver out there that deserves that opportunity to be with one of those top teams to kind of rejuvenate the fan base? You know, it may take one of these top tier teams to say, okay, we're looking towards the future now. Like, look, Hendrick Motorsports a couple of years ago in NASCAR was awful, absolutely horrible, probably one of the worst teams in NASCAR that season. But it's because they went ahead and they did their changing of the guard, and they brought in all these young, inexperienced drivers, and then now they're on top because they were given that opportunity, and they've kind of let in the new names and everything, and that's made it fresh. It's brought in that younger audience again, um, and then it would be nice to see some more like legacies, I guess. And we'll eventually see that in IndyCar. We're seeing that in NASCAR, and you got my dad grew up watching Bill Elliott. So now I'm cheering on his son, Chase. It's just that kind of, and then it brings up the other generations as well. I don't know. I don't feel like IndyCar is in a great spot right now, especially with the divide within the garage of owners. And I'm not saying it will happen or it even could happen, but it just feels like that, almost like the time when there was, I mean, maybe not fully. I was really young, so I don't really know it to its full extent, but when IndyCar split and we had IndyCar and we had CART, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not even saying that could happen, but it just kind of feels like something like that is a possibility with just the way people are like the people that are running the stuff, these teams and everything is kind of going. I don't know.
Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
know. Let me stop being old guy that yells at cloud. And I will say, look, the having Kyle Larson come in, I don't necessarily know if that's a great thing for IndyCar. It's a great thing for the Indy 500. It's an amazing thing for the Indy 500, and it's going to put a lot. It's going to put a lot of people in the stands um, that may not have normally been in the stands or tuning into the Indy 500. It could be a really bad thing for IndyCar if Kyle Larson comes out and wins the Indy 500. And it's like, ooh, NASCAR's best just beat all of your best. And I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but it's one of those things that it's like,
I mean, I know what you're saying, but it'd be like if, like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Indy 500 is. I mean, heck, you saw that even in the early 2000s. You saw like Juan Pablo won his first ever start. Alexander Rossi won his first ever start. Like, it's not now. Granted, I know they all went through like the pipelines. It's not a NASCAR driver coming over, but like, I don't know. I see it as less of a. I see it as more like the Indy 500 is your best race. It's going to be a shot in the arm, and hey, no matter what it is, if it's Kyle Larson, the worst thing that can happen is Kyle Larson wrecks in like the third lap, and ends up, yeah. Whether or not he wins, if he does win, then fantastic. I think that's going to be more.
Like, and I'll be honest. I'm pulling for him to win.
Yeah,
he's one of my favorite drivers. I think he is one of the top 3 best drivers in the entire world. He's one of those guys that you can put him in any type of car and he's going to be successful. My biggest worry, though, is that if he wins and there's these casual fans that are tuning in that have no real allegiance to any like particular team or driver, and they've enjoyed watching him run and win that race, and then they like, oh, I want to see him compete in this double, and then they go on over to the NASCAR race, and it's like, well, NASCAR sometimes puts on a better show. I mean, the Indy 500 is probably the best show, but they're like, I really enjoyed watching Kyle Larson. So now they've got somebody that they are more attached to. And then the following weeks, when NASCAR is on at the same time as IndyCar,
or even not, when IndyCar's off for 3 weeks.
That's true. Yeah, but that's the thing then, too.
Right. Yeah.
IndyCar the reason they drop the ball is they do not, they don't capitalize on the momentum anymore. Yeah. And it just, you go, it used to be, there was a time where, Texas was either before or after the Indy 500.
It was always after.
It was always after. So it always had some momentum, and it was like right into the exciting racing at Texas, and it just really kind of set up for the rest of the season, and it got you really kept that momentum and that excitement going. Whereas, now we're going to take 3 weeks off, or now we're going to go race in the streets of Toronto, and then it's like it's single file racing the entire time with only 2 passing zones, and that momentum that you had is just, it's gone. It's gone.
Right. And I mean, look, I will not I will not disagree with you that this season has been a dud so far. This season has not been the best of IndyCar, just because you've had, really 3. I know McLaughlin didn't lead like every lap like Newgarden and Pillow did in the thermal race, but he still dominated that race at Barber. So you've had 3 races that one driver dominated the whole race, one of which got DQ'd, and then you had Scott Dixon winning at Long Beach on fuel strategy. So you've not had really a lot of great battles for the front, and like that's the thing. I mean, I don't think, I'm not sitting here as a former big time NASCAR fan and calling for the eradication of road and street courses. But I think, for one, road courses of the 2 do offer a little bit better of an opportunity for racing, whereas street courses, you're right, there is a lot of narrow, twists and turns, and it's more about, those few areas that you can pass more than anything else. But like, yeah, I mean, and there's things like, I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you fix, races out on street courses, that's not gimmicky. Now, I think they do drop the ball. Like, the All-Star race should not have been at Thermal, if that's what you're going to call your All-Star race. It also shouldn't have been like the second race of the season, and it also
race of the year.
Right, and also like you're right. They race at St. Pete, and then that was March 10th, and then your next points race is April 21st. Like literally, like 6 weeks. Yeah, 6 weeks later. And that just can't be. Whereas NASCAR, you go right from the Daytona 500, to Atlanta. Yeah. Right. So now one thing they can do, because I know there's been a lot of discontent in the NASCAR stables about like their short track package, and really the only tracks that NASCAR is good on right now are kind of the intermediate tracks, like your Kansases and your Las Vegases. What would be interesting to see, because I've always advocated for more ovals. I think the season should be 18 to 21 races, and you should have 7 of each. You should have 7 road courses, 7 street courses, or just maybe 10 road and street courses and then 10 ovals would be good for the sport. And I think that, maybe kind of overlapping a bit because really, really there's not, they go to the Milwaukee Mile, which NASCAR doesn't go to. They're going to Iowa, which NASCAR is going to this year. They go to Gateway, where NASCAR has just recently come back to. There's no ovals like back in the IRL days where you had, now granted Texas and IMS are, but even IMS has been the road course for NASCAR the last few years. There's no like overlapping ovals that they could put on a better show at, to be like, hey, you know what, that Martinsville race was bad for NASCAR, which I didn't watch it, but I've heard people who did watch it say it was bad. That race at Martinsville was bad for NASCAR. IndyCar put on a great show at Martinsville. I've always wanted the IndyCar's Richmond night race to come back. That would be a fun one. Like, they need to have some of those races, and what they should do is they should alternate it. So if you've got 10, so I kind of like this idea now, 10 ovals, 10 road and street courses, and you just alternate it. So you have an oval, road course, oval, road course, oval, road course. So at least at that point, you have, because that's the thing. IMS is their first, it's their sixth race or fifth race, sixth on the calendar, fifth points race. Everything prior to that has been a road course. And then you've got one oval, and then it's backlogged with ovals this season. And there are more ovals this year than past, but you've had mainly only road courses the entire first part of the year. So yeah, no, I think there's things that they can do, like we've talked about with adding more ovals, like we talked about with the throwback race and the all-star races that they can do. It's like I said when we started the conversation, I just don't know what it will take to get us to that point, because I don't know. Because you're right. I do agree with you that it's kind of stuck in the mud, where it seems like the iteration of IndyCar that we have now has run its course, and it needs to take that next step, but I don't know how that gets taken. So,
yeah. The other thing we even talked about was the broadcast booth, changing it up a little bit. It's just compared to NASCAR's is fun, entertaining. You're learning something about what's going on in the cars, but at the same time, you feel like you're being drawn in by the personal stories that they're sharing about the tracks and what the banter back and forth. It's really you feel like you just got a group of people sitting in your living room watching the race together. Whereas with IndyCar, the broadcast booth is kind of, I don't know, too technical. You have James Hinchcliffe, who tries to bring a lighter side to the things, but then you have Townsend Bell, who's trying to give you all these technical things of oh, this is what I do. It's Townsend, you were not a very good driver. At least in NASCAR, it's they have Kevin Harvick and Clint Boyer. Well, they were successful, and people are tuning in to listen to them. So one of the things I mentioned is bringing in somebody that is a fan favorite, a big time fan favorite. Yeah, James Hinchcliffe is one of those. People loved him, mostly because I feel his story. But people loved him. And then the one I would bring in is, now that he's retiring, whatever, Tony Kanaan. I think if you add Tony Kanaan into the broadcast booth, him and James Hinchcliffe as your color guys would be phenomenal. I think your ratings would go up because people would actually tune in, and I don't know. People like Tony Kanaan. I feel like he could bring some humor to it. He could bring those stories. And then when he talks about technical stuff with the car, people are going to go, yeah, okay, that's really okay. They're going to really dive in with him, because it's well, he knows he was successful, so I think some change up needs to happen there. And that's not, I wouldn't say that's gimmicky,
no,
but it's just kind of making stirring it up a little bit so it just doesn't remain what it is, and it right now it's stale.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that side of things, because yeah, Tony Kanaan in there would be cool. Look, he I'm a follower of him on Twitch. He has a Twitch stream. He's a man of the people. It would be a fun experiment there if he were to join the booth.